Friday nights in our home had long followed a predictable rhythm, a comfort in its consistency. That evening, however, would be different. My wife of 12 years, Avery, stood before the mirror, slipping into a dress that always seemed to highlight her effortless beauty. The fabric clung to her in all the right ways, accentuating the grace she wore so naturally. She was preparing for a college reunion, her excitement palpable, a sparkle dancing in her eyes, and a soft hum of a tune escaping her lips. I had seen her like this countless times before, brimming with anticipation as she readied herself for a night out. Over the years, I had never questioned her outings. I never felt the need to. Our relationship had been built on trust, a bond unspoken, yet unshakable. Before stepping out the door, Avery leaned in, her lips brushing against mine in a fleeting goodbye. "Don't wait up," she teased with a playful smile, and I watched as she walked away, oblivious to the storm that would slowly gather in my chest over the course of the night. The evening unfolded as it usually did, me, a beer in one hand, the remote in the other, settling into the couch as the hours stretched on. Avery's nights out had never bothered me before. In fact, I was always glad that she still had connections that brought her joy. But as midnight approached, an unfamiliar unease began to creep in. It wasn't a sharp pang of suspicion, but more like a quiet whisper at the back of my mind, a feeling I couldn't quite place. She typically sent me snippets of her evening, a quick photo, a location tag, something to mark the moment. But that night there was nothing, a void where her usual updates should have been. At first, I brushed it off. She was probably caught up in conversation, too engrossed to check her phone. But the silence lingered, gnawing at me, and with each passing minute, the unease in my gut grew. By 1:30 a.m., the quiet whisper had evolved into a steady drumbeat of worry. No messages, no calls, not a single sign of her. I wrestled with my thoughts, trying to quell the growing anxiety. But in the end, impulse won over restraint. For the first time in our marriage, I crossed a line I had always respected. I checked our shared phone account. The moment I saw the name, my stomach tightened. Daniel, a name I didn't recognize, but one that appeared far too frequently in her recent messages. He wasn't from her college days. He wasn't part of our circle. He was a stranger, at least to me. With a deep breath, I opened their conversation. There were no outright confessions or blatant betrayals written in bold letters, but the tone, the playful flirtation, the subtle intimacy was unmistakable. A single message burned into my mind. "Can't wait to see you tonight." The ground beneath me seemed to shift. The trust one had once believed to be unshakable now felt like a brittle illusion, crumbling beneath the weight of her deception. My mind raced, desperate to rationalize what I had just uncovered, but the truth sat heavy in my chest, impossible to ignore. At 3:30 a.m., the sound of her heels clicking against the floor signaled her return. She moved cautiously, as if trying not to wake me. Little did she know, sleep had been a distant thought for hours. As she stepped into the dimly lit room, her eyes widened slightly at the sight of me sitting there, waiting. "You're still up?" she asked, her voice laced with something just shy of nervousness. I forced calm, though every muscle in my body was wound tight. "Yeah. How was the reunion?" I asked casually. She hesitated for a brief moment, her eyes avoiding mine as she slipped off her shoes. "It was nice," she replied too quickly, her voice betraying a hint of tension. "Just some old friends. You wouldn't know them." I knew better. I knew about Daniel, and I knew she was lying. Yet, I held my tongue. Confrontation wasn't enough, not yet. I needed more than suspicion. I needed irrefutable proof. Over the next few days, I maintained an outward normality. But beneath that facade, I worked relentlessly to uncover the full truth. I combed through her social media, tracked her digital footprints, piecing together the reality she had tried so hard to hide. And then there it was, a photograph. Avery and Daniel, standing far too close at a party, his arm draped around her waist, her head tilted toward him in a way that left little room for doubt. The evidence was undeniable, but exposing her wasn't just about confrontation. It was about making her understand the magnitude of her betrayal. So I dug deeper, learning everything I could about Daniel, his job, his habits, even his private contact details. With a carefully constructed fake identity, I reached out to him, embedding myself into his online world. He had no idea who I really was. At the same time, I installed hidden cameras in our home, recording every interaction, every call, every meeting. I wasn't going to accuse her blindly. I was building an airtight case. Then came the final act. One evening, Avery casually mentioned she was heading out for coffee with a friend. But I knew the truth. I knew she was meeting him. And this time, I refused to sit idly by. With meticulous precision, I compiled everything. The texts, the footage, the damning photograph. I edited it all into a video and anonymously uploaded it to a major social media platform. I framed it as a cautionary tale. And within hours, it spread like wildfire. By the time Avery returned home, her phone was buzzing nonstop. Confusion turned to panic as she registered the flood of notifications. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the messages, her face draining of color. She looked at me, her voice barely a whisper. What is this?" I didn't answer. My silence was louder than words. Her body seemed to sag under the weight of realization, her breath coming in short, uneven bursts. "Did you do this?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible. I met her gaze unflinchingly, the weight of what had transpired settling like a heavy fog between us. Tears welled in her eyes, streaming down her cheeks as she reached out to me. But I didn't move. The damage was beyond repair. Her lies, her stolen moments with Daniel, had shattered everything we had built, and now the entire world knew about it too. "Did you really think I wouldn't discover the truth?" I asked, my voice steady, sharp, every syllable deliberate. Avery trembled, her tears falling freely now. I didn't mean for this to happen," she gasped between sobs, struggling to catch her breath. "I never wanted to hurt you, I swear. Please, just forgive me. I love you." Her words were empty, hollow echoes of something that had once been real. The love I had felt for her was gone, swallowed by the betrayal that now marred my soul. Forgiveness was a laughable thought. She had destroyed everything between us, and now she had the audacity to beg for absolution that would never come. "I don't want your apology," I said, my tone devoid of warmth. "It's far too late for that." Her sobs turned frantic as she collapsed at my feet, gripping my legs as if she could hold onto something that was already lost. She pleaded, her words tumbling out in desperation, but they meant nothing now. Trust wasn't something that could be pieced back together once it had been shattered. The only sound beyond her cries was the persistent buzz of her phone. Each vibration was a fresh wave of condemnation from the outside world. With trembling hands, she unlocked the screen, scrolling through the barrage of hateful messages. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers had turned against her. They labeled her a liar, a fraud, a traitor. The pristine image she had so carefully constructed over the years had crumbled in an instant, and I had been the one to destroy it. The video I posted had stripped away her carefully woven facade, exposing her deception with Daniel in painful, undeniable clarity. Now everyone saw her for what she truly was. Justice had been served, cold and indisputable. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw with panic. "Take it down. I'll do anything. Just please take it down." I met her gaze, feeling only a quiet, calculated satisfaction. She had no idea how far I had gone to ensure that the truth would be known. There was no one doing it now. No salvation waiting for her. "No," I said simply, my voice unwavering. "You made your choice, Avery. Now you live with the consequences." Her sobs quieted into shallow, uneven breaths as the full weight of her actions crushed her. She had believed she could betray me and walk away untouched. She had been wrong. And now, with the world watching, she unraveled. There was nowhere left to hide. Without another word, I turned away. There was nothing left to say. Nothing that could repair what had been broken. Her cries followed me as I walked out, dissolving into the silence that now defined us. She had taken everything from me. My trust, my security, my peace. And I had nothing left to offer her. Where are you going?" Her voice was hoarse, desperate. "Please don't leave me." Don't do this. I didn't answer. I didn't look back. The man who had once loved her was gone, replaced by someone who could no longer stand the sight of her. What we had was irreparably broken, and in the emptiness of what had once been our home, I packed my things. Her muffled sobs filled the space, but I never hesitated. Not because I felt nothing, but because I felt too much. I had given her everything, and she had tossed it aside as if it were nothing. As I walked out, her cries grew softer, fading into the distance. The silence that settled between us now spoke louder than any argument ever could. It was the final, undeniable conclusion to our story. In the days that followed, she bombarded me with messages, apologies, explanations, frantic pleas for another chance. They flooded my inbox, but I never answered. As for Daniel, he vanished, erasing himself from the digital world as if he could escape the damage he had caused. He had thought he could interfere in my life without consequence. He had been mistaken. Avery and Daniel were left to wade through the wreckage of their reputations, their lives reduced to ruins. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no rewriting it. As for me, I moved forward. The pain lingered, but alongside it was something new. Strength. I had reclaimed control over my life. My revenge had been severe, but it had also been final, and with it came the closure I needed. The silence between Avery and me became the last punctuation in our story. Not a comma, not an ellipsis, but a definitive, unbreakable end. As I drove away from the life we had once shared, I knew I had made the right choice. The past was behind me, and it would no longer define what came next. And with that, this was the end of the story.